Hey everyone, it's Erin with Counter Read, joined by Brandon, also of Counter Read. I say that every video just in case you stumble across this channel and you're like, what is this? We launched Counter Read. It's a Substack newsletter with the intention of telling Nebraska sports stories. Well, that's really it. And we also launched this YouTube channel to be an extension of that. So go ahead to counterread.com, become a subscriber if you haven't already. Subscribe to this channel. Brandon, before we jump into all of the good stuff today, how are you?
I'm well. I do not have a season-ending injury. So all things considered, locally, I think that's pretty good. Not to make light, of course, of anything that's happened, but at a certain point, you just kind of got to throw your arms up and say, "Man, Nebraska is really going through it on the injury front this year."
Yes. And this week's mailbag or this week's video is actually a mailbag format. So if you're watching this and you're like, wait a second, how do I ask questions? You have a couple of ways to do that. Every week on Substack, if you are a subscriber, you'll have the ability to ask questions in the chat. We will start a chat each week. We do that for game days as well. Ask questions. We might answer them there, but you can also always leave comments in the section just below this video as well. We'll keep an eye on that. But this week, we are going to focus this entire video around one question, and it comes from Andy, who is a just awesome subscriber of Counter Read. He wants to know, I know that there's only so much you can do about it in season injuries. What do you expect Rule to do in the offseason to combat this for 2024? Is there anything you can do, especially in a world where players can transfer if they don't get the playing time they want and to build depth? Before we jump into that, for those of you who are like, hold on a second, what are we talking about? Mondays have become kind of the injury information dump from Matt Rule. And it almost like you have to walk in and brace yourself for whatever is going to come. So this last Monday, the injuries, he said, Ethan Piper is out for the year with a knee injury. Turner Corcoran is out for the year with a foot injury. Billy Kemp is out for multiple weeks with an MCL sprain. Tommy Hill is day to day with an ankle injury. We likely will hear more from Matt Rule on Thursday about the status of Tommy Hill specifically, since he is the one that seems to be able to come back sooner. But then Nordine Noeli, another offensive lineman, he is going to be out for multiple weeks with an injury as well. He was actually in surgery earlier this week when Rule provided that update, did not give much more specifics beyond that. I have to give a shout out to Amy Just. She's a columnist for the Lincoln Journal-Star. She called, I believe, these injuries, just the amount of them. How did she frame it? I have to see. Appalling. Yes, that is how it feels. So, Brandon, I'll get your reaction one to that, but then let's dive into Andy's questions about just what can you do at this point?
Yeah, in terms of reaction, I mean, it's just when you go back and stack it all up. So in addition to everybody you just mentioned, I'll probably leave people out because there's so many. But the week before that, you lose Marcus Washington at the Illinois game for the season. Louisiana Tech, you lose your top two running backs, Gabe Ervin Jr. and Ramir Johnson, and then you lost Isaiah Garcia Castaneda in the season opener. That's all on offense. It's pretty crazy to step back and look at just how many, like, not just players but key players Nebraska is without at the moment. What do you do about it? That's kind of the central question. I think you'll have some good insight here, given you've talked to Rule a couple of times about some of his specific views on injuries and injury prevention. I would say we know that he's serious about this. Like, if he's making some of the decisions he's made, and I'll kind of leave those to you, Erin, to talk about if you want. He's making it because he's looked at the research on them. There's not things that he's doing just because he's like, this is how I've always done it, or this is what feels right to me. There's always some backing to what he does. I wonder, because they are so serious about it, I think the transition from one strength and conditioning program to another always maybe has the potential for an uptick in injuries. It'd be interesting to look back, like, across college football, if just like year one of coaching tenures have more injuries on average than others, because not because one approach is better than the other. It's just they can be different coaching staffs have different styles, they want different body types. So if you're trying to change that to any degree in an off season, maybe that ups the potential. But at a certain level, and Rule said he's never had a season like this one, and when it comes to the sheer number of injuries, some degree, I think it's just a little bit of bad luck. To Andy's other point about how does the transfer portal era influence this? I think the hope at Nebraska for this staff will be that they can be a little independent about from that. I mean, I think everybody would like to be, but maybe Nebraska has that potential just because of how they practice. You can truly feel, and as we're seeing this season, you're one play away from going from kind of third team to number 2 on the depth chart to end the game. So I think hopefully if Nebraska gets this going the way they want it, I do not expect them to be a heavy transfer portal team. I guess it's a short way to say that.
Yeah, and you know, to the point of hey, he's never had a team like this before. I saw people bring it up. Oh, the jinx of just Nebraska, like bad luck strikes again. What do the football gods have against Nebraska? Frank Solich came back. How can it be? How can this be? And I just, it is just unfortunately bad timing across the board where it feels like players get injured. It happens, not to downplay or make light of that, but it just feels like in Nebraska's case for some reason it's all happening at once versus really any other team. Maybe you have an injury here or there over the span of a season. Nebraska's just sort of taking injuries in waves. Talking with Matt Rule about it, though, he did make a comment on Monday where he said, we will look at maybe changing things in the offseason if there's ways to do things differently. Matt Rule reads a lot. He is very interested in research. Nebraska has that entire sports for performance team to be able to do the kind of research that he will definitely be interested in. I imagine that they will continue to do that because one thing that people will likely bring up at some point is the fact that Rule does not require his offensive line to wear knee braces because he has found that the research really doesn't say it's necessary because in fact, the injuries that you are preventing, you're actually then ending up causing different injuries with the knee braces. So it's sort of a give or take. Which one do you want to do? So he allows his players to make that decision for themselves. We looked at it. We talked about it briefly where we're like, do they reevaluate that? The thing though is yes, while Ethan Piper's situation is a knee injury, Turner Corcoran's situation is a foot. So they're not quite the same thing based on, it's not like you're seeing the exact same injury across the board. So he is somebody, though, that everywhere he's been, whether it's a Temple, Baylor, Carolina, you name it, his big question to people is why are we doing this? Why is that the thing that we're doing? Why are we not doing something differently? And for him with braces, it was a conversation that he'd had with many people to ask them, they don't wear them in the NFL, but they do in college. So what's the strategy here? I imagine that Rule will be diving into a lot more books and he's going to be tapping into the intelligence of that Nebraska sports performance lab to kind of figure out what can we do to prevent some of these injuries in the future. And honestly, a little bit of this could be because you had the coaching change and transition. Coaches do things differently. So players are practicing differently. And I'm not saying better or worse between the practicing, but practice styles are different. Practice expectations are different. Those things can also lead to injuries. So I'm sure just by the nature of having that full year to kind of see a player through the progression of it will allow Rule and his staff to hopefully evaluate how to better prepare for potential injuries. We've talked about this before. Some of these injuries are tough in key places, but at the receiver spot, Rule is probably wishing he'd spent a little bit more time there in the off season with the transfer portal, because that is an area that right now Nebraska is very light in, but it is what it is. You are where you are. They're very much approaching it from the next man up, and it is just where they're going to go. Now, I will say every week is getting dicier and dicier for this offense. I don't know what this offense is going to look like come Iowa. Who will be available? Who will be playing? If Tommy Hill gets healthy, I know he's day to day, but if he gets healthy, do you move him back to the offensive side of the ball potentially? There's a lot of questions. And I think at this point, if you're Matt Rule and the staff and these players, you have to approach every week, which we talked about, is you are playing like you have nothing to lose. So as the bad luck continues or doesn't, as players come and go because of injuries or, illness, it's going to have to be next person up. It just really is going to have to be. And I think you have to play with that kind of on that chip on your shoulder of like, we've got nothing else to lose here. So just play ball. So I don't know if any of that made sense to any of you, but that's my brain right now. Is there will be questions to answer for Rule in the offseason. He will certainly do it. He has the resources to ask questions and evaluate. But right now, you just are where you are, and you're just going to have to be willing and ready to roll with that. The fun part of Zoom is everybody who's watching this video does not know, which I will have cut portions of this out, but Brandon is currently on mute. And so there's a chance that you may just get to hear from me now because, oh, there we go. Welcome back. But do you have any other thoughts when it just comes to kind of where Nebraska is at this point? You've got Purdue coming to town. I mean, at this point, like, I think to just kind of wrap up the injury portion, it is what it is to a degree.
Yeah, it is. I think it's one of those things where you see Nebraska is going to be down 3 offensive linemen in this game. And kind of the immediate reaction is like, well, they're sunk. You can't lose 3 starters on the offensive line and win a Big Ten game, right? And I understand where that comes from. That said, it's one of those things where we won't know until we see it. And it's possible that we'll watch that game and be like, yeah, they were sunk the minute they lost 3 offensive linemen. But it's also possible we won't. So that's kind of becoming my approach to the rest of the season. I'll try to think of a way where by the time we get to the final game that Nebraska and Iowa can only play defense, because I think they would both prefer that. But you need an offense to go against. Maybe we'll bring in an offense, an independent third-party offense to play offense, and we'll just score Nebraska and Iowa based on how well they play defense. That could be kind of fun.
That could be fun. As we've always said, defenses win championships. So maybe that is the case in 2023 for Nebraska more than ever. It's going to be an interesting season. I think 6 wins are still very possible for Nebraska, although like at that point, who's playing in the bowl game? But I will say I appreciate, and you take this all with a grain of salt for those listening, but I do appreciate this, that like Rule has not in any way at any point kind of presented things as feeling sorry for himself. It's really, I mean, every time I get a notification that the Nebraska football account has tweeted, it's something that's like, what's next? And they're tweeting about the fact that their wide receiver room. I'm going to pull this up because I just saw this the other day and I thought, well, that's, this is the way that they're approaching all of these things is next man up. They said 9 true freshmen played in Nebraska's victory over Northwestern. And so they are really celebrating these newcomers and those that were maybe not expecting to play to the degree that they are now. But at the same time, he made that comment where if you're a recruit and you're seen on the sideline, you're looking and going, I can make an impact fast. So there's pluses and minuses to everything. Not saying there's any plus to an injury, not at all. I'm just saying you can choose to sit and go, well, there's nothing that we can do, everything is bad, or you can choose to make the best of the situation. And I will give them credit that Nebraska seems to be doing their best to make the best of the situation by providing opportunities for as many young and newcomers as possible. So we'll see how that works against Purdue and going forward. It's a big, coming weeks. You've got Purdue, Michigan State, you still have Wisconsin ahead, you still have Iowa ahead. There's some big games still on the docket, and there's one that I'm forgetting, and that's fine. You can tell me. My apologies, Maryland. That is the one I should not have forgotten. But if you have any extra questions or any thoughts, anything, feel free to leave them in the comments. Again, we will do mailbags every week, or maybe every other week, but pretty regularly. So if you have questions, go ahead, head to counterread.com, become a subscriber, join the chats. We do game day chats as well. But also you can leave them in the comment section of this video. Brandon, I appreciate it. We will let you and Zoom go and get on the Zoom appears to want to be on the injury reserve list right now. So maybe it needs time to get healthy.
it might need that. So, well, good chat. Thanks a lot, and we'll see what Saturday brings.
We will. What will be will be. So again, counterread.com. We appreciate you watching. We'll talk to you later.